Hi, this is Kathryn Jean Lopez from National Review, and I'm so grateful to be joined by two friends. Mary Fiorito, coming to us from Chicago. She's a Cardinal George Fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center, but that doesn't do her justice. Likewise with Grazie Christie, medical doctor, Senior Fellow at the Catholic Association. But again, there's so much more, and you'll get a sense of that during this conversation. We are having this conversation because it's the second anniversary of the end of Roe versus Wade, the Dobbs decision that ended it. And I want to start from there. I don't want to bias the conversation because I definitely have some thoughts. Maybe starting with Mary, what are your thoughts? Let me just ask that.
Well, I was at Mass this morning, and today is the solemnity of the Nativity of St. John the Baptist. And I thought that was so providential that we're celebrating the Dobbs versus Jackson decision on this day. Of course, when it was handed down, Easter had been later that year, so it was the Feast of the Sacred Heart. And then this year it is, again, as I mentioned, the Nativity of John the Baptist. And John the Baptist, I love in a particular way because he, as an unborn child, was the first to recognize Jesus, who was also an unborn child. And I think that's such a profound message the Lord gave us, that here you have Jesus being recognized in his humanity as an unborn infant by another unborn infant. So I've always thought that was one of the more powerful pro-life messages that the scriptures give us. So it was, for me, it was a very beautiful thing this morning to hear so many of those scripture readings that we use for today's solemnity that reference God giving us our missions from the time we are unborn children, that he created us in our mother's wombs, that he calls us from our mother's wombs to do something for him. So it had kind of some profound spiritual implications this morning. But, where we are now as a country 2 years after Dobbs, there's still a lot of displeasure, I suppose, is a mild way to put it, with the decision on the left. But for the most part, it's been very interesting. I think they were really counting on there being, and I hate to say this, but I do think they were counting on women dying from not being able to get abortions, that there would be, terrible increases in the numbers of abused children, et cetera. And we haven't seen any of those things come to pass, which is why I think so much of their conversation now is focused on things like miscarriage treatment and ectopic pregnancy treatment, which have nothing to do with abortion. But the fact that that's all they're talking about, or it's primarily what they're talking about, I think shows and proves definitively for us that, what, like I always like to say, abortion is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And people have adapted their lives now to include the legal protection of the unborn. Again, still a lot of unrest, still a lot of displeasure with the decision, but for the most part, I think we're slowly seeing people adjust to it.
Gracie, your thoughts on this second year anniversary?
Well, I really like what you said, Mary, about the solemnity. And I was also listening in Mass this morning to the beautiful readings, which included that great psalm. It says, I am beautifully and wonderfully made. And in a sense, if our society is based and founded on that idea, right, that we are made with a purpose, with a dignity, we're not coincidences, we're not the end products of evolution, we are specific persons meant to be on this earth with specific purposes, and all that beautiful inherent dignity that we hear in the scriptures, and that our society is in the end founded on, right? We're a Judeo-Christian society founded on the idea that every human being is important. So 2 years after Dobbs, I want to be super hopeful like Mary, and yes, and I agree that all the stuff we're hearing is sort of engineered loud noises from people who are politically and professionally involved in the pro-choice crusade. But what I've also detected a lot in these times, in these last 2 years, is how far we've come as a culture in America away from that idea that every human being is beautifully made. And I've just seen, right now I'm in Florida, where I always am, and we are worried about an amendment passing on our constitution, which would make abortion legal through all 40 weeks of pregnancy for any reason at all. And I'm afraid it's going to pass. Abortion might be totally unregulated in Florida come November, to the point that we're going to wish we were North Korea or China or Cuba. That's going to look like the promised land to us. And wow, I'm distressed that we have lost sight of the most important fact, that all of us are beautifully and wonderfully made.
One of the reasons I wanted to bring the two of you into conversation today is because I know, first of all, your lives are living the pro-life message in so many ways. One of the things that is important to both of you is to make sure women have real support, and that people know that support exists. And that's one of the biggest problems right now, that story isn't told. Sometimes because of media bias, sometimes because people, even on the pro-life side, don't realize what the crisis pregnancy center or the maternity home down the block is. And part of the challenge, I think, in this post-Roe period, is people need to think creatively. If you have some extra money, think creatively. So many people, so many of the stories of women, and it's usually women who start a crisis pregnancy center or maternity home, especially maternity homes. They never plan to do it. They realized the very obvious need was housing. And so they kind of fell into it and trusted God in many cases that they would figure it out, and have been a true gift to so many women, to make it plausible for them to accept this child that was unexpected, but is a gift. And when you talk about, beautifully and wonderfully made, and that every person is a gift, placard is from the March for Life. The Sisters of Life made that sign, and we're distributing it. And the Sisters of Life provide help to women. But a few months ago, more than a few months ago now, I was in Detroit, and I was seeing about to open medical clinic, that it was in an old convent. And so here, the Catholic Church thinking creatively about how to use real estate that isn't being used anymore. Sadly, we don't have as many religious sisters as we once did. So what do we do with this convent? Well, let's open a medical clinic with real doctors and be medical care for not only the mom, but the family, if the dad is in the picture, and obviously the children, and do excellent medical care is the goal. And we have so many places around the country, the Gianna Center in New York, Aid for Women in Chicago, which I'm sure Mary will talk about. And I think there's a new maternity home in Miami that you might want to talk about, Gracie. Those are at the heart of the pro-life movement, and those are the stories that need to get out. Abortion really does such a disservice, is such a lie, because it says that women aren't capable of accepting life in difficult situations, but they are. They're capable of amazing things if they have support. But I bring up the Heart of Christ Clinic in Detroit in particular because I was kind of gobsmacked when I got out of my Uber and I saw that there's a bridge to Canada right there. And Gracie, when you mention beautifully and wonderfully made, I mean, they're killing people in Canada because they're homeless.
Yes.
Literally because they're homeless. Well, it's easier to kill them than to find an apartment for them.
Well, death has become an answer. Death is an answer. So we have gone from a culture founded on the idea of beautifully and wonderfully made for everyone. And yes, and I don't want to whitewash all the ways that we failed at that over the last, couple hundred years of our history. Obviously, we failed in many ways because we're human and we're broken inside, all of us. But we are founded on the beautifully and wonderfully made concept. And now death is just one more solution to the problems of mankind. And this is so far afield from where we ought to be. And yes, absolutely. In Canada, they are, I guess, saving money by you have a problem, whatever the problem is, here's a pill for your solution. And the solution is goodbye. Don't be a burden on us any longer. It's really criminal. But decades and decades of legal abortion have set the stage for this, right? Because we started with the children who we don't see, who are the sequela or the side effects, right, of a disordered, all sorts of disorders in our society. We start with them because we don't see them, and they're so vulnerable and they're defenseless. But we've broadened out our reach, and we are just going for anyone who's in our way. That's a super sad, dark way to state it. I'd rather talk about maternity centers.
Yes. And on that point, Mary, can you talk about some of the beacons in Chicago?
Well, that's been one of the great privileges of my work in pro-life, has been to be on the board of directors and volunteer for and be an advisor to Aid for Women, which is a pregnancy center that was actually started by one of our permanent deacons in the Archdiocese of Chicago and 2 women who joined him. And we have 2 maternity homes, Heather's house and Monica's house. And Monica's house is housed in a former convent, which is wonderful. And the number and types of women that we have helped over the years, I mean, every situation you can imagine. We've had a woman who was a refugee from China's one-child policy and lived with us for 3 years until we could get her family over here and get them asylum. We have had, single young Black women from Chicago's South Side. We have had Guatemalan refugees. We have had, again, you name the person with a need, and we have addressed it. And not all of the women who come to us, need housing, but some of them do. And for those who do, it really is important that they have a safe place to experience their pregnancy and then to transition. The goal with every woman, of course, is to move her to a life of independence and where she can care for her child with dignity. But, some women need a little more help than others do. And I'm always struck for myself how much I take for granted in my own life, in terms of growing up in a 2-parent household, of having a father who had a job, of a mother who taught me how to cook and do laundry, and some of the life skills that, again, I completely take for granted and just assume that everybody has them. How to keep a schedule, how to stay on a budget, how to plan for a meal. Many women who come to us, younger women in particular, don't have these life skills because no one's ever shared them with them. No one's ever taught them. And so you really are taking the woman's whole life and bettering it. It's not just about helping her to give birth to that child, although that's generally what brings women to us, but it's creating a new life for her in so many different ways. Again, a life of dignity and independence where she can, provide for her child what she wasn't given herself. And so, again, I could go on and on. The stories are just tremendous. One of my favorites is a woman who came to us named Janessa. She was from the Englewood neighborhood of Chicago's South Side. So that's a very, I think the neighborhood's 99.9% African-American. It's a very segregated neighborhood. And she had been Googling Planned Parenthood. She came across us. She decided that she would just come in and see what we had to offer her. The baby's father had multiple children with other women. He was not going to be part of, her bringing this child into the world. But, we were able to work with her. She moved into Heather's house. We were able to work with her to get her GED. And then we were able to help her there's a wonderful scholarship for Black single parenting women named after Sister Thea Bowman, who's the famous Franciscan nun who was African-American. And so we were able to get her the Sister Thea Bowman scholarship, which what comes with it, in addition to the tuition, is also daycare. and housing that's appropriate for a woman who has a little one. So now she has a college degree. She has a beautiful little boy who just would take your breath away. He's so adorable. She is independent. She lives in her own apartment. She's got a good job. She has a future. None of this would have been possible and would have happened if she'd gone to Planned Parenthood. In fact, she probably would have been right back at Planned Parenthood a year later. We know, the repeat rate, sadly, of abortion in the United States is about 50% now. And so again, what does that tell us? That abortion is the permanent solution to a temporary problem. And those temporary problems don't go away with the abortion. They remain. And so you need to really address the root causes of why women are coming to us in the first place. And when you do, it's transformative.
I've been to Heather's house, and I was just struck by the warmth and the real kind of familial feeling you got there. Everybody was a part of the community. Everybody has their, chores and appreciates what they're being given as they study for their exams or as they try to live a new life
Right.
without drugs. I met a young woman who and I know there's a video testimony for her online where she was homeless, addicted, and now serving women, and she's got
Yes.
street cred, and so it just so many beautiful dimensions to the loving work there and in so many other places.
Right. And it's also striking. Something you said, Kathryn, made me think of this, that for some of these women, it's really the first time they've been shown kind of individual love and attention. I mean, people who really care about them and are not just using them for their bodies and are not just, out to get something. They're not a means to an end, actually loving them who they are for who they are. And I know the Sisters of Life in their work, you see each person as a gift, and you can't love that unborn child until you love that mother first. And that's what you see, that individual attention and, goals that are specific to each particular woman. Again, every woman comes to us differently, from a different state in life and from a different kind of place. But we meet each woman where she is and then proceed from there to help her. And it's amazing what some individual attention and love will do for someone's life.
Well, one of the things I've learned from the Sisters of Life is how many women have never had a birthday celebrated for them. And so the Sisters of Life make a huge deal of birthdays. I've had the experience myself. But as you say, Mary, I mean, basic things. The other thing I try to communicate to people is when a woman shows up at the Sisters of Life, for instance, the first thing that's said is not have this baby. The first thing that is said is, hey, sit on this couch. It's more comfortable. Would you want tea or coffee or water, or what would you like? How can I make you feel more comfortable? Just giving love, as you said, to that individual in front of you. And the other thing I wanted to say before we go to Gracie, to talk about hopeful things in Florida is you mentioned, Mary, the life skills and the basic things. On top of being given love, like we were just talking about, I think about the older kids in foster care. People want cute babies, but when it comes to a kid who's had a rough life, and a lot of trauma and is probably acting out and all these things, those older kids need someone to rely on. Otherwise, they purposely get themselves arrested so they have somewhere to go. Or, they're doing the things that get yourself arrested. And we can do better than that. Anyhow, Gracie, can you talk about some of the bright lights in Florida that you're involved in? I know you too volunteer at a pregnancy
I'm
center.
I'm the medical director of the pregnancy care centers of the Archdiocese of Miami, and that's very rewarding. And we help lots and lots of women, but I also like to think we help lots of families, because really I think we think a lot about the women, but in my experience, the women come with their husbands and their
That's
boyfriends,
beautiful.
and there's a dad in the room, and what they're really looking for is help to make the choice that they want to make, right? So the pro-choice side is all about choice, but we're the ones who provide choice, because the choice that's not available to them is to give birth to the child because they have economic problems and social issues and lack of education and lack of a job, and they have lacks. They're lacking things, and so their choices have narrowed all the way down to this horrible pinpoint of destroy this child that's already alive, that we love already, and who's our baby. This is our little baby, and you see that beautiful dawning of hope in the eyes of the mothers and the fathers, and that's beautiful to see. Sometimes they come with aunts and and extended family. Miami's an extended family kind of place, and they're looking for a way out of what seems the worst possible solution, which is no solution. As you say, Mary, it's a temporary solution to the problem that just doesn't go away when you add that tragedy of abortion to it. And so we're doing great work there, and we're starting, well, I was invited to join a new project that I'm really excited about, a maternity home in Miami. I don't think we've had one. There was one in the northern, in Broward County near Miami, that wasn't able to serve a lot of women. But so there's this wonderful group in Miami called Hermanos a la Calle, Brothers to the Streets, and it's for homeless outreach, but they actually are so successful. They have over 250 people who were homeless are now in housing in Miami. The city of Miami has reduced their homeless population down to about, but there's very few homeless people in the city of Miami right now. The homeless outreach has been so wonderful, and actual housing. So this one particular group, which works for the city of Miami, but it's faith-based, it started in our local parish, and it's mostly volunteer run or volunteer staffed, and are now getting funds from the city and the state, are housing over 250 men, women, and children who were homeless, who were living on the streets. One of the things they found was that when they were able to bring a woman off the street who was pregnant, and they sent her to the shelters that exist here in Miami, the first thing that was offered to her in these government-funded shelters was an abortion. It was cut and paste. Oh, you're 23 years old, living on the street, and you're 3 months pregnant. Okay, first thing, let's solve this problem. That's the way they see it.
Right.
So they were motivated to start a maternity home specifically for these homeless young women and older women who are pregnant, sometimes with their husband, like maybe the whole family is pregnant. But the idea is that just because you're homeless and pregnant doesn't mean that the solution is an abortion. And that's what seems easiest to the government run and secular shelters. And they want to make a difference. It's called Hearts for Life, and we're opening in July. We have two nuns. Two nuns are going to be, and I can't tell you the order right now because I haven't found out what the order is. But we have two wonderful nuns who are going to be working in-house, and another woman who for many years has been working with the Missionaries of Charity in downtown Miami, sleeping at their shelter every night.
It's Mother Teresa's
charity. They do a wonderful job downtown, but pregnant women need their own special place. I've been really thinking about that. I have several children, as you do, Mary, and I had all these babies, but I had a husband, and I had stability, and my eldest son and his wife just had a baby, and she's 3 months old. And I had forgot, I don't know, maybe I didn't think much about it when I was young and healthy and having babies, but those first 3 months, a woman needs so much assistance. She's feeding that baby every 2 hours. She's exhausted, she's strung out, she's recovering from the birth. I mean, there's no more beautiful thing that I can think of than wrapping our arms around a new mom, or helping her to get to be a new mom, right? The joy of seeing that baby and holding that baby in your arms, and then wrapping our arms around her and being there for her, and making those first few months of that baby, which could be so overwhelming and fatiguing and tired. Imagine just doing that on your own, and also worrying about where you're going to sleep that night, and I mean, I can't picture that. I cannot picture a mother with a baby living on a street. That's,
Right.
or in some inhospitable shelter. Anyway, I'm super excited about that, and I'll be writing up on that and doing it on my own radio show. And I hope that everybody I mention it to says, "How can I help?" It's such a beautiful project.
Well, and people who don't live in Miami should take that as a lesson and a challenge, you know? Yeah, one of the things I often notice, and Naomi Schaefer Riley has written extensively about this, about the problems in the child welfare system, but also there are a lot of evangelical groups that have done amazing work in foster care
Mhm.
and adoption. And part of the reason they have is, unlike Catholics, they don't have this big institution. And so I think Catholics often think, well, you know, I give money to the Cardinal's appeal or whatever it is, and so someone's taking care of all the problems. And so we used to be leaders because of religious sisters, because of nuns in foster care and adoption, but we're not anymore. Because of this problem, I think people think of the bureaucracy as if you
Yeah.
pay into it, then everything is well. But also I worry too, you know, evangelical church tends to be one church or a couple of campuses, and they have to look for the needs in the community, right? I think Catholics have become a little more complacent, and there's this great challenge the bishops have issued, Walking with Moms in Need, which the idea is that you look at your parish and see what the needs are. I mean, it's so sad, but I think true. Most of us, if we go to Catholic church, and we're all Catholics, the three of us, we don't tend to know like who's the foster parent. Even there are women in most parishes, I dare say all parishes, who have had abortions and haven't been healed from that. You know, there are so many stories we don't know. But one of the things that scares me a lot is that if a pregnant woman knew to knock on the door of a rectory or walk into a church, would anyone know what to say to them?
Mhm.
And I think that's one of the big challenges, and this is what this parish in Miami is responding to. We got to reach people's hearts, we got to reach their needs, and we have to know what's available. And if there's nothing available in Miami, if there's no maternity home in Miami, we have to start one, you know? And you don't have to you don't have to have been planning on this, you know? Here we are, second anniversary of Roe. So many people still confused and angry and all of these things. Listening to scary stories from the media about how pro-lifers don't want a woman with sepsis to be treated because she's pregnant, which is a lie.
They've been so successful with that narrative.
Sorry.
They've been very successful with that narrative.
So
I guess I shouldn't be surprised, but it's a very fallacious narrative. It's just wrong on every
It's
level.
very
and it's
dangerous, I
cruel.
would
Yeah,
add,
dangerous
because
and cruel.
you know,
Dangerous.
the recent story of that radio talk show host, I guess, in Texas, whose wife miscarried. That was confirmed miscarriage. There was no heartbeat, and he took his wife first to some kind of freestanding urgent care clinic that didn't do any surgeries. And he was intent on his wife getting a D&C. They gave him misoprostol. They gave the misoprostol, which apparently didn't work. They went back to the emergency room. And again, he seemed intent on getting a D&C for his wife, whereas it seemed the physician on call said, no, we'll just exercise. They gave her more misoprostol, I think, Gracie. I'm not sure if you know the details of this better than myself, but you know, they were sort of demanding a surgical procedure to remove the baby's remains. And the doctor seemed to think that wasn't medically indicated, that they would use expectant management instead, which is a treatment option for miscarriage. But he is on Twitter and other social media outlets and has been widely featured in national news stations and sources that his wife had an abortion. And no matter what you say, the procedure she had was an abortion. The doctors wouldn't treat her because of the pro-life laws in Texas. None of this is true. And I
None.
just think, you know, what if you have, say, an evangelical Christian woman and she miscarries, and now she's thinking, oh, if I go to the hospital, they're going to give me an abortion, and I'm a Christian, I'm not going to have an abortion. You know, so because of this lie, you could have women who will be foregoing the treatment that they need in order to avoid going into sepsis. And I just think to use women this way, to somehow justify undoing pro-life laws, I mean, it's just disgraceful. But this is sort of where we are. I never thought I would see the kind of dishonesty in the media, and the dishonesty on behalf of some doctors saying, telling patients, you know, well, what I'm going to do to you is really an abortion, when we know that's not true.
And
And
miscarriage is so painful in the first place.
Correct,
To
right.
add to the,
You're
add
already
to-
suffering.
Right.
I've quizzed several OBGYNs of my acquaintance when I started seeing these stories pop up on the news, and they said, no, a natural miscarriage should be treated as close to nature would treat it as possible. You don't want to start introducing catheters and clamps into a woman who's going through a natural process that she can manage naturally, right? It's painful. It's maybe sometimes a little extended, but you don't want to medicalize and surgicalize something that is already a natural process, right?
And
Like
it comes with risk.
that's how we think about everything. But
Right.
suddenly it's all being taken and twisted out of proportion. And we already live in a society in which the idea of pregnancy and childbirth has been made into this horrifying, right? Like there's like sort of this antenatal, pro-choice antenatal, pro-death, I guess, idea that, you know, reproduction is just too hard. and how, it's going to be so hard. Yeah, it's hard, but we were made for this.
Right.
Right.
Women pregnancy is some sort of
are beautifully and wonderfully made.
Right.
We can do it. We can do it, sisters.
Right. And two, you know, I think, Gracie, what you're saying about, you know, and maybe there are medically indicated reasons that you would have to step in and do a D&C after a miscarriage.
And then you do, but
it is a natural process. Your hormones are gradually dropping. And there may be a time you have to intervene, but you know, that also comes with risks like uterine perforation and bowel perforation. And, you know, the uterus is not meant to have sharp instruments inserted into it. And it's also, you know, potentially
damaging. It has to do with this idea that, you know, this is a process and we gotta grab it and handle it right now. It's gotta be all done in the next 20 minutes.
Right. Right.
No,
and I can demand the kind of surgical intervention that I want. You know, when physicians, again, if they know it's not medically indicated, they need to worry about potential lawsuits as well, right? If they overreach into something. I've had, this has sort of been an interesting thing, you know, as you mentioned, Kathryn, I'm in Chicago, and so I live in the state of Illinois, and we do have abortion legal up until the 40th week of pregnancy. And we have a number of clinics now that specialize in these later abortions for women who come out of state. And I've had 3 different personal injury cases referred to me from women, all 3 from women from Indiana who came here for later abortions. And one of them had a uterine perforation. I think she was 21 or 22 weeks pregnant, which the doctor was able to discern because 2/3 of the baby's remains were still inside her abdomen, outside of the uterine cavity, but in the abdomen. And so her uterus had been perforated. And then she was sent back in a car and sent back to Indiana. And a second woman whose bowel was perforated, and she got an infection that was so bad, the emergency room doctor told me, I still don't know, she and another doctor worked on this woman for hours, how we were able to send her home without a colostomy bag. She said the minute I saw her, I thought, and she had 103 fever, she was already, you know, going into septic shock. But these are the kinds of cases now, as I said, I'm getting referred to me, and it's very sad that the personal injury lawyers I've talked to are hesitant to take them unless the woman dies.
Wow.
Or there has to be a complete hysterectomy.
You see that on the pro-choice side, they're always saying women will die if they don't get abortion. I'm always thinking women are going to die,
right?
Because these late-term abortions are very dangerous, and And let me tell you, they're always done by the worst practitioners.
Exactly. And
Doctors who end up working at late-term abortion clinics, they're the bottom of the barrel. They've been run out of every hospital. They've had their credentials revoked, and that's why they end up working there. That's not real medicine.
right.
That's butchery.
Yeah.
And that's where they end up, and women are being handed over to them. Hopefully not in Florida. Please, if you're a Floridian, vote no on Amendment 4. Save women's lives. Vote no on Amendment 4.
Well, since we're talking about safety, we need to mention chemical abortions are the most abortions that are being done in the United States, the most common way of doing abortions. And of course, we just had the Supreme Court case, which in the end was not about the chemical abortion. It was about standing, whether there was a compelling reason for these pro-life doctors to be bringing the case. And so I almost feel like it's a distraction, honestly, because the media has, in some cases, acted like, well, this was a fail on the pro-life side, which you could say in some ways, but the ruling had nothing to do with the safety of chemical abortion, and chemical abortion is really unsafe. I often mention, and it's gruesome. I mean, I often mention that Abby Johnson, who is a former Planned Parenthood director, there was a movie made about her life, or her conversion from pro-choice to pro-life. She's an activist now, and the movie that was based on her conversion, Unplanned, was rated R. And it was rated R because of the scene where she has an abortion in her bathroom, and it's bloody and it's awful and it's violent. And this is what happens to women, the most intimate violence. And now in their own homes or dorm rooms. And we're supposed to pretend that this is compassionate and normal and good. And it's none of these things.
Right. And you know where there was one of the most heartbreaking things I've seen in a long time was the new Britney Spears book, which
Yes.
I did read the whole thing. And you know, she at Justin Timberlake's insistence aborted the child that they were pregnant with together. And she talks about it as still, she said, to this day, the most painful thing that's ever happened to me in my entire life. And you know, she does seem to struggle with some mental health issues, but you do wonder, is that where they started? You know, she was 19 years old. She really wanted that baby. He kept telling her, we're not ready yet to be parents. And she wanted a baby with him. She really loved him. And then, so at his insistence, they got the abortion pill. She did it at home. She said it was horrific, and she never expected it would be as painful as it was in terms of the cramping and the blood loss. And then he wound up leaving her anyway, you know, and then went and had 3 children with another woman. And you can see how that would completely shape and change your life if you're a 19-year-old woman. So these are not, as you say, Kathryn, drugs to be messed around with. We know that 1 in 25 women who take abortion pills will wind up in the emergency room. And that was one of the most, I think, infuriating things during oral arguments in the Supreme Court case, which, as you correctly note, didn't reach the merits of the pill at all. It was all about Article 3 constitutional issue called standing, but that the proponents of the abortion pill were arguing that, well, women just go to the emergency room for their kind of day-to-day health care. And this isn't really anything to do with the dangers of the pill. That's where they go if they need health care. And I think most people do not. I mean, maybe some people do, dependent upon emergency rooms, but people just don't willy-nilly go to emergency rooms because this is where they happen to get their health care, and they just want to make sure something that they took worked. I mean, Gracie, you would know better than I, being a medical professional, but I just found that to be, you know, a rather insulting argument to women, that this is what women do. We just go to emergency rooms for our regular health care.
I think most of us try to avoid emergency rooms at all costs.
Well, and the expense. I mean,
we'd be insane.
Right.
We'd be insane to do that, right?
Right.
Because we'll get a $22,000 bill, and having waited for 48 hours in an uncomfortable chair. No, that's absolutely untrue. And the chemical abortion thing is a very big deal. And all these states where where abortion is being put into, completely deregulated as through constitutional means, as it might be in Florida, sadly. One of the big golden grail, big holy grails of the pro-abortion movement is to have chemical abortion completely deregulated and available over the counter. Obviously, basically, if you get it by an email request, it's over the counter, right? If you get it in the mail. And the dangers that are going to, the amount of the pain, like physical pain, emotional pain, trauma that's coming for American women and girls is a tsunami with this. And because you have to add to that the moral hazard, right? Of being told since you're 14 or 13, oh, don't worry. If you get pregnant, you take these 2 pills and you have period cramps that are a little stronger that month. And then you're fine. And this is what's actually being told to young women. When the reality is, please pick up Britney Spears' book, just read those few shocking paragraphs and say, do you want this for your daughter? Do you want this for your nieces, your granddaughters? Why would you want this to be in the hands of young women to scar them for life?
And what was so powerful about Britney Spears' book is she wasn't intending, I assume, to be a pro-life testimony. She was just telling people what happened, and it does seem her life kind of spiraled out of control after that point. If you read the book, we don't have a lot more time together. I want to ask, I want to note one thing and ask a question. Maybe 2 quick questions in our final minutes. Gracie, you said something important, which I know Mary agrees with, about having the men in the room. When I've spent time sidewalk counseling and praying outside of abortion clinics, I'm just struck by how, the guy stays in the car, or the guy stays outside and bonds with some of the other guys. How long do I stay? And I kind of listen to some of the conversations. Real choice would be having him in the room and them really talking about the decision together. And that's what these pro-life options are available for if the man is in the situation. And sometimes they think they're expected to support the abortion or encourage the abortion. So thank you for mentioning that. And I think there's a lot of possibilities with the Knights of Columbus. They're Into the Breach program, and they provide sonograms, and that's something, as pro-lifers think creatively, I think they should tap into a little bit more. But given all that we've been talking about terrible state laws like in Mary's state of Illinois, and your concerns about Florida, Gracie, a lot of people ask me, did Roe end too soon? Did we maybe we should have hoped and prayed that we were more ready, and waited until we were ready. Of course, I don't know that the Supreme Court justices, think like that. They shouldn't think like that, where the public opinion is. But the fact of the matter is, it's a big mess. So my last 2 questions to the 2 of you are, and maybe Gracie and then Mary, what is it good that Roe ended? And what should we be thinking about, discerning about doing now on this 2nd anniversary?
I think it's very good that Roe ended. Roe had us on a false plane, and it was on the one hand, making it like ingraining into people's minds and bones and hearts that not all children are beautifully and wonderfully made. And at the same time, creating a huge political back and forth that we're still trapped in. So I think Roe was really bad for both of those reasons, and I'm really glad Roe is dead. On the other hand, we're like the dog that caught the car, right? We chase 1,000 cars and finally we catch the car. What do we do with the car? We finally killed Roe. I feel like one of the dragon slayers. I think all of us who were pro-life warriors for so long feel like dragon slayers. But what do we have in our hands now? We have the results of decades of people being having it dinned into them that abortion is a liberating procedure for women, and it adds to our dignity and our life, and it helps people flourish, when that's 100% wrong. So yes, I'm glad it's gone, but we need to be very, very realistic about the society that Roe has given us, the sequela of Roe. We have to meet it where we have to, like you say, Mary, meet it where it is. Not have, gold, pink lensed glasses and look at it. No, we have to see exactly what's happening, and then we have to go out to the breach and fight on every level that we can. Wherever you are, go out and be that person that God wants you to be, the defender, and don't be afraid. Like, we can't be afraid. God obviously meant for all of this to happen. Everything that happens was meant to be. He wanted it to happen. Maybe we're meant to descend a little further before we can rise. And that's sad, really sad. And we have to pray a lot,
but at the same time, each one of us is here, and, pick up
the art, whatever you have handy, right? Whatever you have, whatever
and encounter people in need, and accompany them. And see what the needs are, and try to meet them, and
we're like the little boy with the dam, right? Like, find your little hole in the dam and put your finger in it, and that's your job. Find your hole in the dam and put your little finger in it, and if we all do that, we're going to resuscitate our culture. I know we can do it.
Mary,
we should not feel guilty for Roe's overturn. I don't feel one bit guilty. It was a bad law. It was bad law. It was a bad decision. And I think there's
bad law and bad history and bad.
Yes, all of it.
National Review had an issue about ending Roe, and we went through all of the things that were unjust and lies about Roe.
Right. In the same way, Plessy versus Ferguson was a bad decision. It was a bad law. It had to be overturned. And, Martin Luther King was told similar things, like, the nation is not ready for desegregation. We're not ready for these kind of, black and white and Hispanic all loving each other in the same community. We're not there yet. And his response was, no, the law can't make a man love me. Like, religion has to do that, and education has to do that, but the law can keep him from lynching me. Right. And can so we have to look at it the same way. The law cannot make people love unborn children and respect all human life, but it can sure keep them from being dismembered or suctioned apart or poisoned with a pill. So, the law is a great teacher, and I'm glad now the law is teaching that at least the people should, it's not a direct parallel to Brown versus Board of Education, but there's enough you can draw on that, that the people can decide this now in a way where we are actually talking about the facts. We're talking about what abortion is and why it is that it should be restricted, the harm that it does to women, so we can't do that if you still had a law in place that, again, was just bad law and made a mockery of our Constitution. So it had to go. And of course, after any kind of big seismic shift in the law, there's going to be culture shocks, right? I mean, you look at Virginia, they didn't segregate or desegregate their schools, rather, until about 14 years after Brown versus Board of Education. That's how long the resistance went on. So, you're going to have people who, like some of the Democratic senators in our current Congress are saying, we will never allow this. We are going to do whatever we can to make sure abortion remains legal for the entire duration of pregnancy. Well, let them get that out of their systems, and eventually public opinion is going to catch up. Eventually, we have science on our side. I mean, we know, for example, my goodness, the surgery is done as early as 16 weeks in utero now. I mean, it's the advances in medicine and technology in terms of treatment and care for the unborn is, phenomenally different than it was in 1973. I mean, you look back, Kathryn, I think you and I have discussed this, John F. Kennedy's youngest son, Patrick, was born at 34 and a half weeks, and he died. Like, he died because his lungs were too immature. And now, I had a daughter born at 34 and a half weeks. It was a nothing burger. She went home from the hospital with me 2 days later,
Yeah.
So we have just seen such tremendous advances. It was about time the law caught up with the science. And so, you know, I love what Gracie had to say. Everybody has their thing that they can do, and just do the next right thing that God puts in front of you. Just do the next right thing. God's going to put something in front of everyone today listening to this message that will allow them to help build up a culture of life. And just do that one thing, and then see if the Lord is asking you to do more after that. But that's all that you can do, I think, at a certain point, is just do the next right thing.
Well, and I have to say, before I let you go, there's so many things that we could talk about. But if you're watching this, the most important things that Mary and Gracie do are their family. And they're activists, and they have day jobs, and they have all these things going on. But the most important thing is that they're mothers and their wives, and that they love their families, and they meet the struggles, and it's not easy, but it's beautiful. And if you're struggling, if you're watching this and you're struggling with listening to politics, and your finances are a mess, or you're worried about medical issue with one of your children, whatever it is, that work, that love that you pour into your family is the most important thing. And so thank you, Gracie and Mary, for being such witnesses on so many levels. But that most important level, like, we can't have a culture of life. People can't understand why life is plausible and possible in all circumstances, unless they see that it's possible, and they see something they want. And so thank you for doing that. And I also should mention that Gracie's husband has written a book about pro-life arguments. I've got some religious stuff in the background, but you don't have to talk religion. You can talk to a person who's secular and make secular arguments. And anyway, the two of you both have to go and do important things. But I just wanted to mention that, and maybe we'll have another conversation soon.
Oh, I would love that. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Mary Fiorito.
A delight to speak to both of you.
Yeah,
and to see your faces.
You both are wonderful.
Uh-huh.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathryn.
And thank you to the National Review Institute, where I work, for sponsoring this. And please subscribe to our YouTube page. We have more conversations like this on there and coming. In fact, the next one will be on the movie Possum Trot, on adoption. And I know that Gracie is interviewing the wonderful Rebecca Weigel, who is a screenwriter, with her husband, who's the director. And I was on the set, and it's just a blessing and a challenge and an inspiration about adoption, and about looking around and seeing the needs. So anyway, on the 2nd anniversary of Dobbs, let's all see the hole in the dam that we can plug in, or just the person we can love more. And especially, I mean, this would be my challenge to everybody. If you have young women in your life and young men in your life, make sure they know that if they got involved in an unplanned pregnancy, that you would embrace them, not judge them. Because sometimes I worry that young people assume that those of us who are pro-life would judge. No, we love. And if that's the one thing you can do today, communicate that love to a young person. You can do it without encouraging unplanned pregnancies, which I think is always a worry. So yeah, show some love in whatever way you can today on this Dobbs anniversary. Thanks again. Bye-bye.